Oh, yes. There you go. Hello, world. What is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. We are here live at the Build studio in New York City. Our next guest's film is based on the inspirational true story of one mother's unfaltering love in the face of impossible odds. Adapted from Joyce Smith's own book, Breakthrough is an enthralling reminder that faith and love can create a mountain of hope and sometimes even a miracle. Starting tomorrow, you can catch him starring in the film as Brian Smith. The great Josh Lucas is here, everybody. How we feel about that? You guys excited? Are you excited? Pretty excited out there. I bet you are too. We're going to bring him out in just a moment. But first, I believe we have a trailer for the film, so let's go ahead and run that clip.
Rise and shine. Breakfast is ready in 10 minutes. And don't make me come back up there. This is our town. It's a close-knit community, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone.
Hi, Miss J.
Hey, how are you girls? And we're always there for each other.
Nice sermon, Pastor.
What do you guys have on for the rest of the day?
Well, John has a basketball game.
Yeah, I've seen this guy hoop it up around here. This kid is so lit.
Text your mom tomorrow and tell her when and where to pick you up. And don't do anything stupid.
Love you guys.
Boys, get off the ice!
We're training for the Olympics, sir.
Cindy.
He's been underwater for more than 15 minutes. It's gonna be a recovery, not a rescue. I got something.
We got him!
We've done everything medically possible. There's nothing more we can do.
No. Please, God, send your Holy Spirit to save my son.
A 14-year-old St. Charles boy who spent 15 minutes trapped underwater is continuing to fight for his life.
I don't believe John will survive the night.
You don't know my son. He is a fighter. So I need you to be the best for John, and you just let God do the rest. You are my pride and joy. I can't wait to see you shoot those baskets and run up and down the court again.
The Smith family asked for one thing. Please pray for John.
In the water that day, I was ready to give up, but then I hear this voice telling me, go back. Either I'm nuts,
Or God's talking to you.
but I don't believe in God.
I believe, but maybe that only goes so far with something like this.
I'm your pastor. I'm supposed to walk alongside you for as long as it takes.
Did you see the Facebook page? It's gone viral.
Call me.
I hope he's gonna be okay.
We're not gonna get through this alone. Whatever you have for me, for Brian, for John, I surrender.
Ladies and gentlemen, make a ridiculous amount of noise. The great Josh Lucas is right here. Come on. Come on. Dude, welcome to the show and congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a
Very
fantastic
happy to be
film,
here.
man.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, it's so nice to have you here, man. We're super excited you're here. And you've got a lot of amazing things going on. Of course, Breakthrough is dropping tomorrow. People can see it tomorrow. I want to talk a little bit about that. You've got another couple amazing projects I want to get to. But first and foremost, man, how's life? How is Josh? How are you doing, dude? How are things going?
I'm good. I'm happily enjoying this beginning of spring here in New York City. Anyone who's spent this winter here knows it's been a pretty long and hard one, at least for me. I definitely. This is the first winter, I think, in my whole 30 years in New York City where I was like, I'm done with this weather.
You've reached your point. That's
I got beat up by this winter, but once it gets spring, it's like, no, it's all wonderful all the time. But
Forget about all that. Never mind that it's going to happen again in about 7 months.
Yeah,
We
right.
just got to, right now, focus on the now and the present. I was, if I didn't have this job, it'd be considered stalking, but because I do, I was researching your Instagram feed. And I saw you were DJing recently. Did I catch that, man? What was that all
my
about?
alter ego
Yeah.
is ridiculous because I basically am one of those people who annoys everybody in my life by being an aggressive DJ. Whenever I'm in control of the music, I'm aggressively in control of the music. So I came up with this guy called DJ Prowess, who one of the people I work with at this restaurant I'm involved in said, "You're not a DJ, you're a song chooser." I was like, okay, that's all right. I'll take it. So I aggressively song choose.
So funny, man. Yeah, I saw, because I'm looking, all your posts are rather self-explanatory. There's something going on. Oh, he's coaching. That's really cool. I got to ask about that. That's interesting. And then the DJ Prowess post showed up, and it was just like the card that you had made. I was like, well, I'm made of questions now. I got to know what is going on here.
Part of it is I really love to DJ, and I really love to DJ where you either, everybody in the room doesn't know the song or has very strong feelings one way or another about the song. So that you either love the song, hate the song, or don't know it.
You have a go-to, like, obscure poll that you know this is going to get the reaction I want every time?
This guy called DJ Sabo, he has a label himself called Soul Selectus, which is like very tribal world music that is pretty amazing, by the way. He's got a song on SoundCloud, which is 6 hours long, which is my favorite song on earth. 6 hours long.
6 hours? Is it called 6 hours long? No.
It's DJ, look it up.
Look up
DJ Sabo.
DJ Sabo.
Just look up the 6 hour long song.
Nice plug. All right, perfect. Look up the 6 hour song from DJ Sabo. All right, well, first of all, that's great to hear, man. I'm glad you're having a lot of fun out there. You guys, speaking of having fun, I was talking to Marcel this morning. He recently did a couple of premieres for these. I think he only made it to 3 of them. He said there were 4 premieres. Have you been to, how many of the premieres have you done for Breakthrough? Have you?
Well, I think what he's talking about is that they went around the country with the movie and showed it to a bunch of different people all over the country, and they went with the real people. One of the things that is pretty, somewhat unique about this film is that when they show the film, they're oftentimes showing it with the woman who really is the mother and the boy who really was the boy, and the team of people is going out and seeing it with an audience watching their own life story. And so, but the real and only actual premiere was last weekend.
Last weekend, that's what I thought. Yeah, he was describing exactly that, kind of like a roadshow thing, and like going around and seeing it with different audiences. What's that premiere and all of that? What's that experience been like, seeing audiences react to this film? That's always a fun part as an actor, as a performer, to see your work in a big room, on a big screen, with a full house, and seeing people respond to different moments in the film. What was that like for you?
Actually, one of the people I'm here with today is this woman I work with called Nicole, who's my PR person, but she's also a dear and true friend. And we started working together many years ago, but we had a film, Glory Road, which is the story of the 1964 NCAA Final Four, and this sort of unknown team from a tiny town in Texas, El Paso, Texas, and this coach, Don Haskins, who played the first all-black basketball team. Anyway, Jerry Bruckheimer made the movie, and Disney ended up releasing it, and Nicole and I toured the movie with Jerry, where we took it to 16 cities all over the country. And to this day, it's one of those experiences where every single time we showed the movie, it got this just glorious reaction. Something like, very rarely do you feel in your career where you see this just pulse of just joy. And my experience is, for a lot of the audiences watching Breakthrough, there's been somewhat of a similar experience. Because a lot of the audiences, and this is one thing I want to be very clear about, this movie is a faith-based movie. So a lot of the audience that see the movie, they come into it with an inherent strong belief, in their church and in their system of beliefs. So they're basically, it's a celebration. It's sort of like going to church. So the premiere that we had the other night, Devon Franklin, who's the producer of this movie, who actually was a pastor himself, he presents the movie almost the way a pastor would. Like the audience is riled up. The only person I've ever seen do anything quite similar is Quentin Tarantino. If you go to a Tarantino premiere, he will stand up in front of the movie, introduce the movie, and he'll be like, and from the right-hand side of the house comes the great Samuel Jackson. And Sam Jackson comes down, and Quentin Tarantino ends up being the bigger and biggest star of the movie. Yeah. And in this case, Devon does something kind of similar, but as a man of God, the way Devon really is, and he happens to also be a producer, and he happens to be truly and totally fascinated by stories about faith and about what he wants to put out into the world, which are movies that are helping audiences that find faith or explore and celebrate faith. And in this case, he found this story, which is utterly a insane true story. It is, whether you believe in miracles or not, it is a miraculous story in that this boy was underneath the ice for 15 minutes, and then when he was, pulled out of the ice, he was lifeless, completely lifeless, no heartbeat, no pulse, no nothing, no sign of life whatsoever for an hour. And then his mother, basically prays in front of his body when she's alone in the room to say goodbye, and he gets a pulse. But then the doctors say at that point, look, even though he does have a pulse, his brain is dead, his body, his organs have all failed. There's no possible way that he's going to be, at best, his life is going to be completely traumatized, and all of your life is going to be very different for the rest of your life. And she just had this inherent deep belief, and the community came together, and it's very much, again, the true story, which, again, I go to this point of, like, I think it's easy to dismiss this movie as a faith-based movie, but the reality is that pretty much, we sort of time-stamp the film as we go through it, of this happened at this point, this happened at this point, this is 3 days later, and pretty much across the board, except for a couple casting choices where they combined doctors and things, it's deeply authentic in that way. And it really is a story of a community that came together, a community that's deeply religious, and the church that came together. And one of the reasons why I did the movie, which again is a true story, is that they decided to take him off life support, basically to either let him live or let him die. Yeah. And the night that they did that, the entire community came out and they surrounded the church, or they surrounded the hospital, and they sang. And they to the point where they could hear inside the hospital room, they could hear the singing from outside. And that moment, which is a beautiful scene in the movie, but that true moment, when I told my little 6-year-old son about that, he was like, Dad, you got to do this movie. And it's really one of the reasons I did the movie, because it's true.
Were you, and yeah, it's a pretty amazing moment in the film for sure. Were you at all intrigued, knowing it's kind of a faith-based film, and how strong, Chrissy Metz's character, how strong Joyce's like laser focused and strong she was in her convictions? Was it interesting for you to get to play, here's Brian, this other character who obviously they both want the best for their son, they want John to make it, but he, if anyone, is the character that kind of has almost a crisis of faith a little bit. He's not 100. He's like, there's only so far we can get with this method. Like, you see a little bit of that in the trailer. Were you, like, as an actor, like, excited to kind of sink your teeth into that person in this world, within this story?
When I first read this script, the first thing I did was go look at the real story in terms of, what was the Google News and different things I could find about it. There'd actually been, I think, an NBC profile on it and different things. And what I discovered pretty quickly is that Brian, who is the father, he was reserved, to say the least. He was maybe, I don't want to use the word skeptical, but he genuinely did not think that there was any way that his son was going to come through this. And he had a true crisis of faith. But he also was a guy who was a deeply quiet guy to begin with. He was very reserved. Honestly, in many ways, he's very, very different from me. And so I said to the director, Roxanne Dawson, I said, when I spoke to her on the phone, I said, I don't think I'm right for this character. And she said, well, but that's exactly why we want you to do it, because we think we need something underneath it that can relay a lot of the different complexities that the character's feeling with almost no dialogue. You'll see when you see the movie, he's very much in the background, which Brian, the real guy, was. He couldn't go into the room because he was struggling so badly with the pain that he was feeling and the fear that he was feeling for what had happened to his son. But also he was genuinely, I think, having a battle of his own faith. And that to see his wife be so clear in her conviction when he thought she was going to end up suffering worse because of it, he relegated himself to the background and relegated himself even outside the room. He couldn't even be in the room because he couldn't see his son be in that situation. So I thought, okay, this is a totally complicated and challenging character to play without any dialogue, basically, and without much to do, seemingly, but with a very important position within the story. And one of the things that I think is the most challenging, interesting, and rewarding about telling the true story of a real person who's alive is to find out their reaction, And the same thing I had with Glory Road, which was I wanted to make the movie that Don Haskins, the coach in that movie, wanted us to make. It might be a little different from the true story, maybe in Glory Road more so than this story. This story is like remarkably accurate, I would say, but according to Joyce and John, the real people, that they think that the portrayal of Brian is just totally accurate, and that's my goal.
Yeah, that's got to be. I was curious about that because you're, as an actor, you've played a lot of people that are real life people, both living and deceased, and so I wonder how much you internalize like the pressure of having to nail that, because this person's, especially the living, they're going to see it and they're going to have an opinion, and that's in your head. But when you're in the moment on set, do you kind of have to forget about that pressure and forget about that and just kind of focus on the material, or is that part of it? Do you have to bake it in?
I mean, for me, I think. I'm not just saying this, that becomes the person I'm probably the most worried about, more than reviewers or more than the director or more than anybody. Is making it for them at that point. In a weird way, I feel like that. And I will say this, it's important that you're giving them the portrayal, in my mind, that they want, unless it's pretty clear cut that you have free reign. It's almost like, I don't know if anyone read Steve Jobs' amazing biography, and the writer talks about how he was given free reign. I think that was like mind-blowingly evolved and brave of Steve Jobs to say, tell the story, warts and all. Yeah. And I think if I was given that, I would be in a bit of a different position. But in every case where you're playing a real-life character, you have that responsibility in a sense, and that pressure and that problem, that good problem to try and handle and navigate.
Yeah, you mentioned how when we went into how reserved Brian was and sort of the role he played. I think I saw another interview you were doing with Marcel where you had mentioned on set you kind of kept quiet, and you pointed out you kept quiet on set much in the same way that Brian would have. Is that something you often employ, where you'll carry those traits even just when you're on set, navigate, or was it just for this story in particular you were kind of quiet, just kind of keeping to yourself, inhabiting that character to sort of stay in that zone?
I don't consider myself a wildly method actor by any means, but I think the way that I handle myself on set oftentimes infuses the character and vice versa, so that if the character, I do think they go hand in hand, and the actors I've worked with who I oftentimes have the most, not respect for, but the most similarity in terms of working style, is that they come with a bit of the character with them at all times. Now, there's some, I think, mythology in terms of actors being so in character that if they're playing a bad person, they're therefore a bad person on set. I oftentimes find that those kinds of actors don't really interest me. But like we're going to talk about it in a minute. I've worked with Christian Bale twice now.
I'm really excited to ask you about that.
I worked with him on American Psycho, which is as difficult of a character as you can possibly do. And he was absolutely lovely, genuinely, and yet he was, to an extent, in character. I then just worked with him again on a movie, and it was similar, where he was deeply in character, but he was always totally kind and present in the subtle little moments in between. So that I find more interesting than somebody who's like, oh, because I'm playing a nasty character, I'm going to be nasty all the time.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting, especially.
I think those actors exist, by the way. Yeah. Some of them are deeply talented at doing that, but makes life difficult for a lot of the people.
Well, yeah, I can imagine, and I think given the choice, we would, everyone would prefer to be with the person who's capable of still being a human, like still being nice in those moments. I'm really excited to ask you about some of these upcoming films that you've got, Ford versus Ferrari in particular. We're going to do that, and we're going to talk about that right now, but just a quick reminder, Breakthrough is tomorrow. It drops tomorrow, and it's a perfect movie to go see with your family. Go see it this weekend, Easter weekend. What better time to see Breakthrough? So that's tomorrow. Coming down the road, no pun intended, Ford versus Ferrari, super exciting. We think that's the title. It's how it's listed on IMDb. That's how I've heard other people talk about it. But I'm really excited how you got involved with this and what your experience has been. I think you just wrapped like 4 months ago or something like that. Very recently you wrapped up on it.
So this is a pretty great story. James Mangold directed it. And it's the story of when Henry Ford II basically is afraid that the Ford Motor Company in the early 1960s, genuinely they were afraid the Ford Motor Company was going to fail, was going to go out of business. That is, the sales were down so deeply, so they decided what was the best thing they could do, and they decided the best thing would be to go buy Ferrari. So that he sends a team of people over. In this case, Henry Ford II is played by the great Tracy Letts. Tracy sends over John Bernthal plays Lee Iacocca, and a couple other actors are sent over to Italy to buy Ferrari. They go through the whole process, and as they're literally signing the papers, Enzo Ferrari says, "Wait a second, you don't own Ford Racing as well?" And they say, "That's why we're here. We're here to buy the racing program. We don't care about we care about your cars." But he said, "No. You cannot. I've done my whole life has been to build the racing program. The cars are a different story." So the deal falls apart, and he says to the team, "Go back to Detroit and tell Henry Ford II. Not only is he Henry Ford II, but he's basically a fat fake of his father, of the great Henry Ford." He said he deeply insults him. So he comes back, and they report back to Henry Ford, and he says, "Okay, not only do we now not buy Ferrari, we beat Ferrari. We beat Ferrari at all costs." So he tasked the entire team of people, including this guy who I play, Leo Beebe, who's the head of Ford Racing, to basically an unlimited budget and time to spend to go beat Ferrari at Le Mans. Le Mans, if anyone knows, is this 24-hour race. It's the hardest car race in the world. And so we go out, we buy Shelby, Carroll Shelby is played by Matt Damon. We buy the Shelby and with their team to basically build a car that can beat Ferrari. Matt Damon's character Shelby then goes and gets the best race car driver in the world, who is Ken Miles, who is played by Christian Bale. And it's the story of the dynamics of this inner workings of this huge confluence of events and technology and everything in the 1960s as they take all these cars and automobiles to beat Ferrari. The thing that was really remarkable about this movie, I keep calling it the Lawrence of Arabia car racing movies, because unlike most of the movies that are done these days, where a lot of it is digital technology and CGI and all computer technology, they did this movie almost entirely for real, meaning every single car that you're going to see in the movie is real. Every single car is going at actually the speeds that they were going. They rebuilt sections they shot the movie all over the world, but they also shot in the places where they built the actual Ford factory for one day, for one shot, which is one of the most remarkable sets I've ever seen. They built the Ferrari factory for one day, for one shot. One time we were sitting in a room, and I looked around and I was like, "Wait, how much is that car right there?" And like $58 million. The one car alone was $58 million. Then from there, that room had about 25 Ferraris, all in different phases of production, all from the 1960s, and they were all real Ferraris. There was over $200 million of Ferraris in that room alone. So anyone who's like a technophile of all of the details that were put into this movie were a level that is just barely seen or not really seen anymore in terms of the way movies are made. And they even built a huge section of the Le Mans racetrack, including the grandstands with thousands of extras and everything. They decommissioned an airport in rural California and built this whole section. So the whole movie had a level of authenticity that you will see when you see the movie, down to the car crashes, down to all of it.
That's freaking fascinating, man. Do you find, are you seeing more of that on the inside of the business, of people sort of, when given the chance, we're getting less CG and more, if I can do it practically, I want to do it practically, I want to do it real? Or is it still a rarity to see someone dedicated at this level?
I think it's unheard of. I think it's more and more unheard of. I think the reason why is that the costs are just so tremendously prohibitive. But it also you have to have a director and a studio and a team of people that are willing to take that gamble. And in this case, there was a perfect confluence with James Mangold coming off Logan and the different movies he's done. Christian Bale coming off Vice, Matt Damon. I mean, just the whole team of people, and that James was so dedicated to basically this film having a level of physical authenticity that's almost unheard of.
Those people, this project, it's not hard to get money for that movie at that point.
I don't know. I mean, the true backstory, and I don't think I'm going to say anything, is that Michael Mann had wanted to make this movie for 10 years with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, and that he needed $350 million. And no studio would give it to him. So for years, the movie's been in the works with, massive movie stars, and that it took James Mangold saying he could bring it in for less than that to get it made.
That's pretty amazing. Before we go to audience Q&A, there's another film you're working on that I'm really intrigued by. You're doing The Secret but like a story sort of adapted from the book The Secret and inspired by The Secret. And you've been working on that. Are you still filming that? Have you wrapped up on that one?
Finished that. So
you finished that one as well.
This is anyone who knows the book The Secret, which is about the law of attraction, positive thinking to an extent. It's a bit of a self-help / philosophy book in certain ways. It's been very successful all over the world. The director, writer of Sweet Home Alabama, took the book and adapted it into a love story between me and Katie Holmes, and it's this really interesting story of a woman who's, deeply down on her luck, and a guy who shows up who knows the secret. So that's as much as I'll say on that one.
I think, you don't want to give away too much of it, but that's pretty awesome. You mentioned you're working again, reunited with the director of Sweet Home Alabama. Something that I noticed in looking at your Instagram when I was going through researching is that here we are 17 some odd years later, and you can't escape at least one comment with somebody who's still got a crush on you or still thinks that movie, it seems like it's going to follow you. It's lasted for this long. It's going to be around forever. And how do you feel about that? People constantly ask you about a sequel or a reboot, all these different things. It's always coming up. How do you feel about having one of those in your life?
I have to say for years I sort of rebelled against it. I think for years I did movies almost as a reaction, not against it, but I wanted to go out and prove like my inner dark side, or like prove that I could, really be a dark, dramatic actor, to be honest with you.
Typecasted. You don't want to be known for that.
And I think I'm not only on the other side of that, but more and more I really appreciate and respect that movie, not only for what it is, but for the fact that it's lived the way that it has, and that, firemen stop me on the street and say it's one of the few romantic comedies that they like, and that I genuinely, I respect the movie. I probably, in some ways, feel it's one of the closest characters I ever played to myself, which is why it's really hard to do. I think acting is easier when you get to play somebody very far away from yourself. It's much more like Cowboys and Indians, but when you're playing somebody who's, a little more in your, I guess, wheelhouse, it's more revealing. And so it's one of the things I said to Andy Tennant, the director, when we went and did The Secret, is I felt like, there was a part of that story that I wanted to re-access in terms of the character. So it's interesting.
It's a fun little bit of trivia. John Smith, the real John Smith from this film, when he found out you were going to be playing Brian, he geeked out and he said 2 movies he grew up on, Sweet Home Alabama, Glory Road. So I thought that was great that he had that personal connection and was such a huge fan. I don't know if he ever got a chance to tell you that. Well, cool, man. I'm having a lot of fun talking. I could do this all day, but we've got some questions from the audience. I want to make sure we have time for them. How many? Okay, I got 2. All right, so the first question is coming from right here. You have a microphone.
Hi.
Hi.
What is your favorite part about acting? And if you had a chance, would you give any advice to young self at the beginning of your career?
What is my favorite thing about acting, and what advice would I give myself at the beginning of my career? The first thing I would say, the first advice I would give myself at the beginning of my career is the advice I would still give myself. It's still the thing I struggle with the most, which is probably the same advice I give anybody that I want to keep giving myself, is that, hey, it's all going to be okay. Meaning like, what I find so remarkably difficult and challenging about this job, at least my career, has been how, and I use this word tidal, it's been, meaning there's been like in tides and out tides, and like tides that are not so strong and tides that are weak, meaning there are times where I've like been flush with work and times where I couldn't get a job to save my life. And what's been surprising about that is that variance, those tides, they haven't really changed that much. Like they're not that different when the beginning of my career, when I had, no name or no profile, than they are now, where it shifts because now it's like, oh, well, people know you, so they don't want you to do that, or they don't want to let you do that. And so the tides I've been surprised at as how consistent they are in inconsistency, and that life continues to be both wonderfully rewarding and deeply challenging, as the same way my career does. And that's been surprising. But what I would say to my young self is like, hey, it's going to shift again. There's going to be a new tide that's going to come and change. And I guess when I get in trouble and when I have problems is when I forget that, and when I forget to be comfortable with the out tides, the times where it's not going so well. And my favorite thing about acting is, it's a multitude of things, which is hard to say, but is the experience of being someone somewhere new. And I mean, the travel has been a huge part of it. The reward of travel as an actor, that you get to go into a world, whether it's, in this case, Winnipeg, Canada, which was deeply challenging in the dead of winter, pretending to be a parent whose father or whose child has died, was really challenging. And yet I've made movies in China that were similarly challenging and wildly rewarding. And I say that because you're also then, you're in a new place, being tasked a new kind of human being who's possibly great at something else. You know, like, it was fascinating to watch Christian Bale play a race car driver, because he's an extraordinary driver to begin with in his life. He races motorcycles, the guy, like, and so he gets to explore and amplify a side of himself. And that to me is, again, so I say the travel of it is all encompassing, meaning you get to travel to a new place as a human being, a new time in your mind, a new passion that you get to reward yourself by learning about. That's why it is a really remarkably great job, and also a very rare and strange job, because suddenly you don't have work for a long period of time where you have to deal with yourself. You have to deal with, who are you? What are your passions? What are your, how do you fill yourself when the characters that you're playing are not filling you?
Thank you for that. We're going to go to our last question in just a second, but talking a lot about navigating those waves and navigating those parts of your career, I'm curious, especially like back to back, working on a film like Breakthrough and The Secret, what have these films, what have these stories done to inform your spirituality and how you handle all these, and sort of your perspective, your greater perspective on all of this?
I think that's a great question, because I did these two movies with the knowledge that there would maybe be a backlash against them or me for the fact that I was doing, to an extent, faith-based or inspirational movies. And I clearly did them thinking about them, because I feel like we're in very cynical times. I think it's very easy to be dark and unhappy right now, particularly dealing with social media. It's very easy to be cruel to one another. And with the protection of the internet to have in front of you, to have as a curtain to not have to show your face. I believe entertainment at its core should be fun and should be at its best, thought-provoking and maybe even rewarding from a joyful standpoint. So in both films, I felt like there was something that you could take away as an audience member that hopefully made you feel a little better at the end of the day. I have a 6-year-old child. It's important to me that I put out things at this point in my career that are hopeful. I mean, I'm still happy to go explore the dark side, but the reality is that the more I play in the world of joy and hope and the good side of life, the rest of it is dark enough. So, yeah.
Fair. Thanks for answering that. It was a rather personal question, so I appreciate your candor. We've got time for one more. Last one's coming from right over here. Come on down.
Hey, how's it going? So you talked a little bit about the challenges of playing someone who exists in the real world, and I was just kind of curious, going back to when you were first reading the script and studying the character, how did that kind of affect your headspace of getting to know the character on the script, knowing he exists in the real world?
This one, that's a good one, because this one in particular was unusually challenging, because I had to look at the faith-based element. I had to look at the idea of, would the movie be dismissed even though it's a true story? And then I had to look at, I personally have to take in my personal life, which is, I have a 6-year-old son who's in school in New York City. If I'm going to do the movie, I have to leave him for a period of time. And so I had to basically juggle all of these different equations. And then I had to look at what is the value of the movie, meaning, is it going to come out and be something good, or is it going to come out and be something that's just totally dismissed? Is the movie going to end up being something that people respect, or is it a payday? I mean, you have to go through all these different things. And so I, sort of did the Rubik's Cube of all of those equations, and then I decided to talk to my 6-year-old about it. And I was driving him to school, and I told him the story. I told him the true story, and I told him that moment when the community surrounds around the hospital and they sing, and he's like, "Dad, you have to do this movie." And it was in that moment that I was like, all right. And I said to him, "Are you okay with the fact that I have to be gone for a period of time to do it?" And he said, "This one, it sounds like it's worth it." And that to me was the equation that really kicked it to me to then go begin to explore like the specifics of the character and talk to the family and talk to the different people about why this guy was who he was and how he's different from me, you know, and how I could play him in ways that I could both learn from and hopefully give something to at the same time. So an interesting, I guess, like a Rubik's Cube, like I say.
What an awesome, mature perspective for your 6-year-old.
And he was at the premiere the other day with the real people, by the way. This is a funny story. You'll like this. So we're at the premiere the other night, and John and Joyce Smith, who Chrissy plays and who Marcel plays, were sitting literally in front of us. And throughout the beginning of the movie, Joyce Smith kept turning around and being like, that's exactly the way it happened. That's exactly what happened. And my son then started asking Marcel, or John, the real John, questions about what really happened. And finally I was like, guys, we're in the middle of a movie. Like, all of you stop talking. But yeah, it was rather remarkable to be there with my little boy and the real little boy and the real mom and go through see the story with them there.
Thank you for your question, by the way. We're going to wrap things up, but you know, through everything we've discussed, you really hit the nail on the head of what this film does, which is, you're right, it's easy to be cynical and all that, but you walk away, regardless of where you land or feel or your faith, of seeing all these human beings that came together for something, that came together for someone, and seeing what that love and what that energy can do. Forget about the miracle aspect, but the fact that you see John's character and how he feels towards the end, realizing all this love in the town for him and stuff like that. And regardless of what you think or feel, you walk out of this movie feeling pretty good. So I think you guys knocked it out of the park, and
I hope so.
Congratulations on that, man. Breakthrough. If you want to feel good, go see it. It comes out tomorrow. Or get a bunch of people together to go see it this Easter. It's a perfect movie for the weekend. I want you to do me a favor right now. Everybody make an obscenely loud amount of noise to join me in thanking the great Josh Lucas for being here. Come on.
Thank you, AOL Build. Thank you. Yeah.